Hey everyone, it's T-Lore, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to go behind the scenes and show you what we do at STOBETTER to get all of the math and calculations that we do. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of boring math. You're going to actually get to see the gameplay that we do, which is also probably pretty boring, but we'll try and make it exciting. So today I'm going to be testing out the Dimensional Hypermass Torpedo, which is an event reward, and the Maelstrom Trifluoride Torpedo, which is also an event reward. I am starting on a character that I have named and built specifically for this purpose. He's appropriately named Zero because he has no skill points of any kind, and we have Commando selected, which means that there's no specializations going on. We tend to undo the traits, but I have been doing some testing with and without, but a good practice is to go through and check and make sure that all the traits are off. Alright, so pretty much everything is zeroed out. Active reputation doesn't really matter too much. And I'm going to try and pick up some things that might be helpful. And I'm going to show you a little bit what I'm looking for. So you'll notice that like this one is 13.8 torpedo weapon damage. That makes the math kind of annoying. So I'm going to go through and do is look for ones that are 12.5 or something that's nice and even. 17.5 is okay. And you can see these don't cost me very much, but I want to have some nice even values to work with. So I'll pick up some of these 17.5. Alright, so all of these are going to add the same amount every time. Now I could look and see what the very rare ones are. They're 18.8, so this is not going to help us a whole lot. I could get these warhead yield chambers that are plus 20%, but as long as they're all a nice even number like this 17.5, it'll work out pretty well. So now that I have those, I need to go and find a ship that's going to be good for testing. So I'm going to run over to my shipyard, and I'm going to be looking for a ship that has the capability of slotting high yield, torpedo spread, and concentrate firepower, since these are all helpful powers for working with torpedoes. And in that case, I'm going to pick up the first ship I can find that has command seating on it. Alright, so we'll pick this guy up and make sure that it has command seating. And it does, so I've got command seating. I can put on my concentrate firepower. I can make sure I get torpedo spread and double check and make sure I've got a torpedo high yield. Okay, great. I also want to make sure that I pick up photonic officer to get my powers to come back a little bit faster. And then I want to look through the mastery and make sure that none of this mastery is going to affect things. Now, this one does have kinetic damage, so that means I'll have to factor that in on the other side when I start doing the math. And then we start unequipping all of the gear that's on it. You do want to make sure you have some shields, a core, and engines. Otherwise, testing gets to be really quite awful. And then I'm going to put my torpedoes up front. And just to make sure, I'm going to try and put in a torpedo that we know information for. Now, the second thing that we need to do before we get to testing is I am going to upgrade this. Now, you'll see it just flickered back there and became Mark 12. That's so that it's not in the infinity scaling torpedo. It's now a fixed rarity, and we're going to also note that you cannot re-engineer this. So I was going to re-engineer it to get rid of those damage mods. We'll just have to calculate those out later. Same thing here. We're going to unequip and upgrade. You can kick it back to 12, and now you'll notice that it has 3 modifiers on it. It didn't have those before, so that's one good reason to upgrade before you start testing, is sometimes the modifiers will show up. Now we can re-engineer it. The only mod that we want to get rid of is damage, because that can be kind of problematic, and unfortunately I don't happen to have enough dilithium to re-engineer it right now. So we'll just click through and find some dill. This is not a character I use for anything other than testing. So we can just randomize this to anything but damage, because damage is kind of a mess to work with. All right, so now we have re-engineered these. We've gotten them upgraded. So we have a Mark 12 regular old torpedo that we can put on there. So how do we test? I go to an episode here that has ships that you can shoot at infinitely and they won't die, and that is Doomsday Machine. So I go to Klingon War, the Doomsday device, and replay. And now I can just transwarp there, make sure I've got everything all set. All right, so I will transwarp. Also going to check duty officers just to make sure that I don't have any duty officers equipped. Actually, recharging torpedoes would be pretty helpful, so we'll go with that. So we're going to go ahead and go to Doomsday device. Now that we're at Doomsday device, I set the difficulty to normal just to make sure that I don't get destroyed by the targets in here. And we'll make sure we've got some torpedo powers on here. And some heals, and we should be good to go. So the first thing you have to do is you have to clear out the enemies that are on the map, and that can be a little bit hard to do if you're set up too heavily for testing.
Pew pew!
Alright, now that we've cleared the Targ and the escort, we'll wait for our photonic officer, photonic reinforcements to dissipate. And then we get to testing. So I'm going to start by unequipping everything, making sure all my gear is off that doesn't need to be there. And at this point I can even take off the engine and the shield just to make sure that nothing funky is going on. With that said, we're going to start collecting data. So this is not the exciting part, but that's okay. I turn on my spreadsheet here, and I'm going to go in and make sure that I can copy this off. All right, so we're going to copy sheet, and I'm going to name this one the hypermass. Now, we can go in here and change a whole bunch of different settings, and I'm going to go through and start by just clearing out all of this information that's in there. All right. Now, for the Cat 1 adjust, we're going to go ahead and put in the 10% that's built into the ship. So if you remember, our ship has the 10% kinetic damage, and since both of these do kinetic damage, I want to make sure that I get that included. The second thing is we want to look at our endeavors and accolades. So endeavors are going to be anywhere from 0 to 30, and accolades will provide 2% kinetic damage. So I'll pull up my endeavors, look through, we're looking for projectile weapon damage. And in fact, that number has gone up because they raised the cap. So I have 38 plus the 2 for the achievement. So that's going to be 40%. And then usually I try to leave these alone. I am going to go in and change my data points to 6. And then most of this stuff is left alone. All right, so our first torpedo is the hypermass torpedo. So once I find it in this skill window, I can see that it's got an 8-second recharge. I can look through and see the damage. So I'm going to start by checking my setup, which has nothing equipped on it. We have 10% kinetic damage. I'm going to go and check all of this. And you can see it's all zeroed out. All right. So With that, now I can assign this value as a base. We're at Mark 12. Rarity is very rare. Damage mods. Remember how we had damage modifiers on here before? So we're going to have to check the torpedo. And we can see that it's got damage times 3. So we'll go back into our spreadsheet and put 3 damage mods, 0 skill points, 0 Cat 1 because we've already accounted for the ship up here at the top, and then no Cat 2, and our observed value is 7299.2. Alright, so we got 1. Now we go back onto our ship and we equip one of these consoles. So we've got 1 equipped now. We go into the spreadsheet and we add a Mark 12 uncommon warhead yield chamber console. Alright, so our weapon is still Mark 12. It's still very rare. It still has 3 damage mods. No skill points, but this time we have 17.5 Cat 1, 0 Cat 2. And we'll go and look and see what we have for hypermass. 7644. Okay, double checking traits, making sure nothing's up there. Yep, we're good. So now we just repeat this several times. So I'm going to continue to add consoles. Alright, so now that I've got all of those Cat 1 points in there, we can look over and we can see that it's able to put a nice line on there and figure out exactly what the values are. So this has a built-in Cat 1 of around 97% and a base damage of 1800. Now one more thing that I like to do, and that's going to be to unequip all of these. And I'm going to go in and turn on a very specific trait, and that would be Fleet Coordinator. So Fleet Coordinator is great because it gives us plus 2% bonus all damage. So we can do base plus Fleet Coordinator, all the rest the same, and it's actually going to get us that Cat 2 value just to make sure that that scales correctly. So we go back over here to our torpedo 7445.2. Okay, and so I put that in. It showed me I didn't have any error, which means that it's scaling with Cat 2 correctly. So how does that compare? So if we look at a quantum torpedo has a lot less built-in Cat 1 and a lot lower base damage. So this actually would outparse a regular quantum torpedo. Now, compared to any number of other torpedoes, looking at something like the dark matter torpedo, so you can see it's pretty typical to have 1500 base damage for these quantum torpedoes. So the hypermass torpedo is definitely a winner. It doesn't have any special abilities or sets or anything like that, but it's got a same cooldown as a quantum torpedo, and it does quite a bit more damage for base damage. Now, it does give you a chance to steal some power, but it's not that exciting. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same process now for the Maelstrom. Now, the interesting thing with the Maelstrom is that it's going to be different based on how many charges that it has. So if we look at the Maelstrom right now, it has 3 charges, 29,543.2. So we'll start by duplicating. I'm going to keep a lot of this same information in there because a lot of this is the same. And so I'll be able to copy it all over. And then just change out the observed values. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire this off, and it's going to tell me what it is for one charge. 9847.7. Now if you remember, we put that one trait on there, so that's actually our value down here at the bottom. So I want to make sure I unequip that trait as soon as I get out of combat, and then I can once again come up with the base damage here. 9654.6. $10 101.7. Now remember, it's going to build charges, so I need to make sure that I'm watching that it stays at one charge. See, now it's up to 2 charges. So what I want to do, just for fun, 21097.6 over 2. Okay, now I'm going to fire this off. And it's down to one charge, 10,548.8. So each charge is just a straight multiplier on the value. So we'll go ahead and add another console. Alright, so you can see all these errors went away. It's done a nice job of solving it, and now it says built-in Cat1 of 97.87, which if you remember is very similar to what we had on the Hypermass, and then the base damage is 2,554. So this is a really strong torpedo, but it does have a really long cooldown. Now the other piece that I wanted to check is, do these interact with concentrate firepower? So what we're going to do is that we're going to find out that, interestingly enough, looked like I was able to get a couple of these Maelstrom trifluoride torpedoes off here. And you can see that it brought back my cooldown, but it still has a lockout on the Maelstrom torpedo. So I can keep firing this Hypermass torpedo, but it does lock out the Maelstrom torpedo. So now that this one has come back, I'm going to high yield it and see what happens. So I high yielded it, comes back pretty quickly, but it still doesn't have the charge that it needs to build up. So there's no way to really get this thing to charge up any faster, but you can get it to cool down very quickly. So the Hypermass works with torpedo high yield under the concentrate firepower. The Maelstrom sort of does, but the problem with it is that it's trying to build charges instead of actually needing that extra cooldown. So you not only have cooldown to worry about, you also have the charges that it's working with to work with. Alright, so now we've figured out how good these torpedoes are, and we can see that both the torpedoes are really strong. However, you do have to worry about the charges on the Maelstrom trifluoride torpedo, and that can be a little bit annoying to try and manage. But the Hypermass quantum torpedo, it seems to be a really, really strong torpedo that you can use if you happen to have unlocked it from that event. If this video helped you, consider liking and sharing this video, or subscribe to our channel. For more guides and builds, check us out at www.stobetter.com.